Now, on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app, O'Connor and Company.
It is 5:06 on this Friday morning in your nation's capital. You made it through the week. Good Lord, how did we get to the middle of April already? In fact, we're on the backside of April, the 18th day of this fourth month of the year. All right, it's full steam ahead, guys. Coming up at 7:05, we're going to speak with Chris Ruddy. He's the CEO of Newsmax. 7:35, Byron York from the Washington Examiner. 8:05, Raymond Arroyo from EWTN. He does a few things over at Fox as well about this Good Friday. And then at 8:35, our buddy John Andrasik, singer-songwriter, Five for Fighting. Of course, his iconic song, Superman, has been re-released now. He's re-released it in support of the Israeli hostages because he uses his art for good instead of evil. We love John for that. He'll join us at 8:35. Also using her talents for good instead of evil is the effervescent, delightful, ginger-headed Emily Domenech with us this morning for vacationing Patrice Unwood.
Good morning, Larry. Good morning. Thanks so much for having me. Effervescent. I like that.
You are. You're a little bubbly. Unlike your brother, who is just a... Your brother Ben's been a curmudgeon, I think, since he was 22. What is?
Oh,
he's just always he's kind of a grumpy cat, isn't he?
I always joke that he's been 57 since he was 5 years old. It really just suits him. Very serious. But you know, he likes some good comedy too. So loves a good comedy show.
That's true. Well, sure. I mean, you know, good. So he's human. That's good to know.
Yeah.
But
he is a human. He is a human person. We do know that. But like, not just a brilliant robot.
Yeah, but he's and he's a Marylander, or excuse me, he's a Virginian.
Yeah.
And here's my worry about all Virginians, frankly, is that not one person in Virginia is loved and treasured the way by your senators, Tim Kaine and Mark Warner, the way Maryland man Kilmar Abrego Garcia is just cuddled incessantly by his senator, Chris Van Hollen. It really is quite. It's turned into a love story.
He just adores him. It's amazing. Also, like, I have just been getting such a kick out of you as a Maryland man yourself. How you have really leaned in on this story because it's absurd. Like, I cannot believe it's actually happening in front of my eyes.
Let's bring everyone up to speed here on the latest. As the president of El Salvador put on his X post, photographs have now been revealed of Kilmar Abrego Garcia meeting with Senator Chris Van Hollen in what looks like, I don't know, a Residence Inn down there or something. I'm not sure. And President Bukele said, Kilmar Abrego Garcia miraculously risen from the death camps and torture, now sipping margaritas with Senator Van Hollen in the tropical paradise of El Salvador. And it's true. They look like they're on a first date. It's the love in Van Hollen's eyes is inescapable. There's one photograph where he's reaching over and it looks like he's holding Garcia's hand. And he's leaning into him with like a twinkle in his eyes, like he's saying, I promise I'll have you back home beating your wife in no time. Don't worry. We got you covered here. It's despicable, Emily.
It's really wild. And honestly, I was told that the prisons there were terrible and they look like a lovely tropical vacation. So maybe we should rethink this whole strategy. I thought we were sending people there because they were awful, and it was awful, and it looks amazing.
So you're like, hold on, I was promised a concentration camp, damn it.
Right. Like, why is it so nice?
There's also an interesting and noteworthy optic here, and that is that there's a third party on their date. Don't you hate it when there's a chaperone? Apparently, he's the translator. So let me just remind everybody. Kilmar, as we're all calling him. I don't know, why are we calling him by his first name?
I don't know.
The
left had to personalize him somehow.
Yeah, I guess. Senor Garcia has been in the United States of America illegally since 2012, right? So that's over a decade. And he still needs a translator to get through a basic conversation. So it's just layer after layer after layer of outrage over this guy.
But he's a Maryland man.
He's a Maryland man who can't speak English, even though he's been here for over 10 years. Well,
Yeah.
listen, if he went to Baltimore County schools, I guess that makes sense.
Yeah, it's not his fault. It's Maryland's fault.
As the New York Post put it, Garcia, 29-year-old illegal immigrant living in Maryland, deported, met with Van Hollen. After he met with Van Hollen yesterday, and the two of them, I don't know what was discussed. Van Hollen, strangely, he's put out a little selfie video, every step of the way. Here I am at the zoo. Here I am at the beach. But he didn't actually put out any official statement about his meeting with Garcia. Garcia looks like he's fine. He also, of note, by the way, he's not in prison garb. He's in jeans and a tropical shirt. He also has quite a few tattoos going on his arms, including tattoos on his knuckles, which is not typical, I think, for most.
Is it typical of MS-13? Because maybe.
Well, I think it is kind of an indication of gang membership when you have tattoos on your knuckles, isn't it?
Eek.
You're in the Navy. How many tattoos do you have?
I don't have any, and I should have them. I feel like I'm like not doing my Navy duty by not having any tattoos. Like it seems like something I should do.
What's funny? My daughter, when she had her induction into the Naval Academy, she was still under 18. She was 17. I had to sign like the parents' permission for her to join the Navy. So, and she said, as soon as I turn 18, I'm gonna get the Navy Jack, man. I'm gonna get the snake and the don't tread on me with the stripes, and it's like I'm badass and ready to go. And then her birthday came and went, and I was like, "Where's the tattoo?" And she goes, "I'm gonna get it next semester. I'm gonna get it." Long story short, she never got the tattoo. She is also. Which is shocking to me, actually.
Yeah, it's something I definitely haven't thought about. Yeah, I also think that like once you get in, you realize most of the people with the tattoos are the enlisted. It's not as cool when you're an officer, unfortunately.
Oh,
but that's because the officers aren't as cool.
Like, that's true.
That's usually the game.
All right, so we've digressed a little bit here about Emily's lack of tattoos, only because unlike Maryland man Kilmar Abrego Garcia. Emily has
Maryland
no
man.
tattoos. But, if we're looking for evidence whether this Maryland man is in fact the member of a terrorist organization known as MS-13, which has wreaked havoc and murdered innocent Marylanders all over Prince George's County where Garcia lived, we've got some more evidence here. I'm not saying these tattoos specifically are MS-13 tattoos. I'll leave it to the experts. Like the Prince George's County gang unit who said, yes, this guy's MS-13. We've got more details about their report. And their testimony. In fact, the sheriff of Prince George's County appeared on Fox News yesterday and said, "You bet your ass he was MS-13." There's no doubt about it at this point. And if you notice, the narrative from the Democrats, Chris Van Hollen, Elizabeth Warren, whoever else is still dying on this hill, they're no longer claiming that he's not a gang member or there's no evidence of gang member or anything. All they're saying is, this is about due process. This is about due process. Everybody deserves their chance for due process. Well, I'm sorry. I don't think an illegal immigrant who has run-ins with the law and already had two judges say she should be deported, I don't think they are deserving of the exact same due process that you are, Emily, or that I am, or my children are. There's got to be different standards in this country, aren't there?
Well, and it's also the thing that gets me is that he had multiple court hearings, and that is due process, and that is more than he deserves as someone who came into this country illegally and has been here for a significant time illegally, whether he committed other crimes or not. And that, I think, is the thing that has just like completely lost me. I mean, like it's one thing to say like, we need to make sure American citizens have due process. We absolutely do. There are different rules for American citizens than there are for folks who are here illegally, not people who came here on a green card, people who came here illegally.
By the way, even people on a green card, if you're in this country on a green card and you don't have to be convicted of a crime. If you're arrested for a crime, you are subject to deportation. You're supposed to keep your nose clean when you're here as our guest.
Right, because it's a privilege to be here.
Thank you. Well, real fast, we've been relying on Will Chamberlain, Legal Eagle here. He's been doing a deep dive into a lot of the background. He commented on the optics of this picture of Van Hollen. He thinks that this is a big win, Chris Van Hollen was. Will Chamberlain says this is actually going to help the administration. Big part of the rationale for any injunction is what's called irreparable harm. Plaintiffs tried to argue that the family separation, irreparable harm. Abrego Garcia has no right to be in the United States, no entitlement to family reunification in the United States. But the only real irreparable harm is that he was in a torture dungeon in El Salvador, and now the evidence is that he is not in a torture chamber in El Salvador.
Well,
He's living. He looks great. He's fine.
And even right before this picture of them meeting in like a Margaritaville, like you literally have Chris Van Hollen being like, "I'm at notorious prison." Like again,
right.
I was told this prison was pretty rough, and it looks pretty nice. So maybe we're doing something wrong on the other end.
Yeah, thank you. Margaritaville. That's it. I had no idea Jimmy Buffett had already started his franchise down there in El Salvador.
Been investing.
It's impressive. It's 5:15.
WMAL, making sense of the news. Live from the Home Paramount Pest Control Studios. Home Paramount, the leader in pest control since 1939.
Yeah, actually, I've done a quick little research on this tattoo that I see, giant tattoo on the forearm of Kilmar Abrego Garcia. Apparently, I do have details on it now. It's a real beauty, a Mexican cutie, but how it got there, we haven't a clue. That is
incredible
official statement from the Garcia.
From the prison, from Margaritaville prison.
Yes, exactly. Yeah,
I'm starting
Maryland
this rumor. I'm just leaning all the way in on this. It was in Margaritaville. I did no research whatsoever, but I'm starting here.
Listen, your CNN material, if you're going to come out with that.
I was going to say,
unresearched.
By 10 a.m., it's going to be everywhere that they were in a Margaritaville, and you will have heard it first here on WMAL.
So picking up where Will Chamberlain left off here, the irreparable harm claim by the plaintiffs here, Garcia's lawyers, said that he's stuck in a torture dungeon in El Salvador. Obviously, he looks perfectly healthy. He's being detained, yes, same as he would be if he were returned to the United States, by the way. As the administration keeps saying, there's no ending to this story where he ends up back in the United States of America. Now we're just arguing over process, right? And Democrats, they're going to win an election on due process because, when all is said and done, it's like when people argue about the Civil War and say, well, it's really about states' rights. It's not about slavery. Man.
Man.
Let me ask you let me ask you a follow-up question. States' rights to do what? And it was
right.
Like, okay, well,
and then they're like, well.
So it's like, we're arguing about due process. Okay, but due process for who and for what? And ultimately, the deportation of this gang member is still going to happen. Chris Van Hollen is just upset that there wasn't one more hearing in front of a judge. So Will Chamberlain, again, this is a legal mind that we have been relying on through this process, says the simplest path forward is for the administration to simply move to have the withholding of removal lifted while Garcia is in Salvadoran custody. He has lawyers here in the United States who can represent him in a hearing. And then at this point, given both his very probable MS-13 membership and the fact that El Salvador is now a tropical paradise, this can be dealt with really quite easily, and I suspect it will. Here's Maryland Sheriff Jeff Gollard. Now, this is a Harford County Sheriff, not the Prince George's County Sheriff. Excuse me for saying that before. But Sheriff Goller of Harford County, they all have the same kind of gang investigation units. They use the same evidence. They use the same law enforcement tactics because Maryland law enforcement all sort of share the same sort of training and approaches to doing the job. And here, his own senator is undermining law enforcement and their ability to determine who's a gang member or not. Here he is speaking out yesterday with Bill Hemmer.
You've looked at the evidence. Are you convinced, as the White House says, he's an MS-13 member?
Oh, 1,000%. Yes, indeed. 1,000%.
1,000. No doubt.
Not only that, he's no doubt, and he's a domestic violence abuser. I mean, in our community, we would screen him working with ICE, and hopefully they would decide to take removal proceedings for just that reason. And he's been through removal proceedings before, and they asked for him to be removed, and yet he was still here. So kudos on the Trump administration for removing a criminal. Horrible on Senator Van Hollen for wanting to bring him back.
Okay.
So, Emily, I at the risk of beating a dead horse, and the only reason that we're still, going after this horse is because Chris Van Hollen has made such a political fool of himself, quadrupling and quintupling down on this. Well, how does this play out politically for these? When Chris Van Hollen returns home, did Democrats treat him like a conquering hero? Because I don't see how he has advanced his political. He's not going to lose his seat in Maryland. It's Maryland after all. But I don't see him having any political future after this stunt, which was clearly a stunt.
Yeah, I mean, what I think we're seeing from Democrats is just, like you said, stunt after stunt that doesn't really make any sense. You know, we've got Chuck Schumer out there singing "We Shall Overcome" about, you know, various federal grants being paused. We have, you know, Cory Booker talking for the longest filibuster in history over nothing. What he actually filibustered was the vote to confirm, like, the ambassador of to NATO. I mean, like, absolutely ridiculous things, because they just don't really know who they are anymore. And I think they have like the extreme case of Trump derangement syndrome that is making it really hard for them to figure out, like, what are the actual policies we're arguing for, not just the anti-Trump like rhetoric and positioning and posturing, but like, what is it that makes you a Democrat? I couldn't tell you. I don't know. All I know right now is that it's hating everything Donald Trump does.
And one other aspect of this that may be a remarkable boomerang effect on Democrats is that this has compelled investigative journalists who care to actually look into this guy and look into tactics and law enforcement tactics. Our friend, fabulous friend, Amber Duke over at the Daily Caller looked into the Homeland Security report about that traffic stop in Tennessee in 2022. So when Biden was president, when Kamala Harris was your border czar, and when Alejandro Mayorkas was in charge of Homeland Security, Garcia was stopped in Tennessee for speeding, reckless driving. He was driving without a license. He had 8 other people in his vehicle. None of them had any documents. None of them spoke any English. Garcia pretended that he couldn't speak any English when he spoke with the cops. They ran a check on him, saw that he was on the terror watch list, called DHS, called FBI, and DHS. Biden's Department of Homeland Security said, yeah, take a picture of all of them, have them write down their names, and then let them go. And so, you know, like I said, the silver lining here is that it's another example of showing the American people that we were completely inept, didn't follow the law, didn't enforce the law, and made this country even more dangerous under the last presidency. And I think all in all, most voters are going to be happy, due process or not, that Mr. Garcia and his like are being deported. I mean,
again, I just can't get over this like due process argument. The guy had 2 hearings. Like, he should, if due process had been followed, he should have been sent home after the first hearing. Yeah. Like, and the only reason he wasn't is because the Biden administration didn't actually care about protecting our borders or about removing illegal immigrants, because that was, frankly, their whole policy. Yeah.
Well, one other quick development here. Apparently, while Chris Van Hollen was visiting Mr. Garcia at this torture chamber of a resort, this is sad news. He blew out his flip-flop, stepped on a pop-top,
tragic,
cut his heel, and had to cruise on back home. But there's booze in the blender, and soon it will render that frozen concoction that helps him hang on. Because Chris Van Hollen is having a great spring break, wasting away in Margaritaville. Indeed. It is 5:25.
Tune into WMAL on Saturdays at 5:30 a.m. for the All-American Book Club Show with political veteran Eden Gordon Hill. Explore ideas and stories not driven by the mainstream media agenda, as pro-America books and authors from around the country are featured each week. Eden Gordon Hill arms her listeners with the knowledge and insight needed to fight back in the war on our freedoms. So tune in Saturdays at 5:30 a.m. on 105.9 FM, the WMAL app, or online at WMAL.com.
Coming up, you ever want to take a fishing trip at American Samoa? Well, it just got easier. It's kind of a big story, and we're going to share it with you next.
WMAL-FM, Woodbridge, Washington, a Cumulus media station. Making sense of the news. News Talk 105.9. News now. Now on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app. O'Connor and Company.
It's 5:36, O'Connor and Company on this Friday morning. You made it to the end of the week. Thanks for joining us. Emily Domenech, I would say America's favorite redhead. Is that fair
I
enough?
love that. That's fantastic.
Right?
Yeah,
Why
please,
not?
let's say it.
I can't think of another one. Although, I'll be honest, when they sent the cast of The View up into space on that phallic-shaped rocket,
my
did you
gosh.
notice they like, we got to have an Asian, we have to have a Latina, we have to have some. They didn't send a ginger up. No redheads.
Gingers. It's discrimination, honestly. The most universal discrimination is against a redhead.
And they did a lot of other things to alter their appearance. You'd think one of them could have dyed their hair.
Right. Like I said, it was a great step forward for false eyelashes in space.
I would call it a giant leap.
A giant leap.
Coming up at 7:05, Chris Ruddy, CEO of Newsmax, will join us. 7:35, Byron York of The Examiner. 8:05, Raymond Arroyo of EWTN. And 8:35, John Andrasik, Five for Fighting. That's quite a combo on this Good Friday. And for those of you who are observing this solemn and yet hopeful day for our salvation, God bless you. I hope you're you're going to have a wonderful Good Friday, and one that allows you to reflect on all the great blessings we have. Let's start with fishing. Fishing's a great blessing. You seem like, Emily, because you love the outdoors.
I do.
And one of your focuses on the Hill has always been climate policy and energy policy, things like that.
Natural resources, baby.
In fact, isn't one of your iconic photos that you use in social media is, in fact, you obtaining a fish from the sea?
It is. I was going to say my ex Twitter profile picture is me doing a classic hold up the giant fish you just caught and pretend to kiss it move.
Exactly. So now, are you a Chesapeake Bay fisher person, a fly fishing in a river fishing person, or are you a deep sea, go out on a boat in the ocean fishing person?
Honestly, all three of them. My favorite probably is the deep sea fishing because fishing, if you haven't done it, fishing for red snapper in the Gulf off of Louisiana is a fantastic experience and really fun. And it's beautiful out there. But I like to fly fish, so I've gone fly fishing outside of Yellowstone and lots of cool fun places. So I all kinds of outdoor activities are my jam.
Well, if deep sea fishing is your thing and you're looking for some pretty unique, exotic places, you've got good news yesterday from the Oval Office. President Trump just opened up fishing rights in American Samoa, out in the middle of the Pacific. Let's take a listen to this as he was flanked by American Samoans there in the Oval. I love the way they dress, too, by the way. Please, you think Zelensky dressed down for the appearance. These guys,
hey, no,
like
this is how they dress. That's their
dress.
formal attire. You got to take it seriously.
All right, let's listen.
This great announcement, and thank you so much for your awesome leadership in giving back to American Samoa what had been taken away from us without even consulting with our leaders and people at that time. And,
they just one day just took away 3 Californias.
Yes. And so this is such a wonderful gift to American Samoa. And, of course, it's also Holy Week beginning today. And so thank you for returning to our indigenous people this wonderful gift of our traditional fishing grounds.
It's such an honor to do this.
Yeah, this is very cool. And by the way, the region that we're talking about is completely unpronounceable, so I'm not even going to try. You want to try that one? You see the word
I don't want to get
at?
it wrong.
It's Papahana Makawakaika Mekalakahai Mekahaini Ho, I think is how you pronounce it. I think that's the...
We're just going to claim ignorance on this one.
But
they're historic fishing grounds.
George W. Bush, 2009, there were concerns, some environmental concerns. There were some issues of endangered species. He put a protective region of 50 miles out of American Samoa, but everything outside of 50 miles, which basically, isn't that like basically international waters anyway? He let it go. 50 miles outside American Samoa, no. Then Obama in 2014, with a stroke of his pen, extended that by 200 miles. That's why he said, 4 Californias. 200 miles in every direction. If you live in American Samoa and you wanted to fish, or if you're visiting American Samoa and you wanted to fish, you would have to travel 250 miles from the island to drop a line. It's outrageous. And so all Trump did was bring the boundary back to where Bush had put it, 50 miles out from the coast. And the Samoans are thrilled with it.
Yeah, I mean, and the one thing that's important to note here is that we're talking about commercial fishing rights. So these are the industries that keep these islands alive. They are, they have tourism and they have commercial fishing. And so this is a perfect example of kind of the hubris of the environmental movement, which often says, because of something we decided in Washington, D.C., we are going to drastically change the lifestyle that's available to the people who actually live in these places. And in this case, the historic populations that live in these places. So we see it a lot on tribal land, even in the continental United States, where you'll have endangered species impacts that can really significantly economically damage a tribe because nobody cared about them. They only cared about the fishes and the birds and the potentially endangered species. But we know these organizations know how to properly and appropriately and responsibly fish. They've done it for centuries.
Absolutely. There is some concern in Congress. Congressman Hank Johnson of Georgia has expressed his fears that if too many fishermen go to American Samoa and they get on the island all at the same time, that it could capsize, that it could actually...
It could. It was a very serious question.
Well, remember the disaster that happened to Guam when the Marines were doing exercises there.
That man continued to get elected to Congress. Just remember that.
we will keep an eye on that because Hank Johnson, more than any other congressman, he demands to be taken seriously. And so we will, in fact. Otherwise, short of that, I think we should plan a listener trip to American Samoa for some fishing. Who's with me? Let's go.
I love that idea. The one thing I want, one more American Samoa moment here, is that these folks are so incredibly patriotic that they celebrate Flag Day as one of their biggest holidays, which is part of why they signed this this executive order this week.
Yeah. You mean in advance of Flag Day?
Flag Day, yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Well, that's 2 months from now.
Yeah, they wanted to do
Flag Day's in June. All right.
Oh.
That's also Trump's birthday.
Is it really?
Yeah, he was born on Flag Day.
Get out of here.
Will he go to America Samoa to celebrate?
Oh, I hope so. That'd be incredible.
He'll go fishing. It's 5:43.
Later this morning on the Chris Plante Show, young people in the United States converting to Catholicism in record numbers. This ought to freak out the Democrats. 9 a.m. on WMAL.
It's 5:50 now. O'Connor and Company with Emily Domenech this morning. And I'm just thinking about drinking margaritas with Chris Van Hollen on a fishing boat off the coast of American Samoa. There's something wrong with me.
If only all of us could enjoy a lovely vacation with Senator Van Hollen. I mean, I don't really want to go on vacation with him, but I'd love to go on a nice trip and sit at a Margaritaville.
He picks great places, yeah. Speaking of the ocean and the deep blue sea, the Secretary Burgum, your Interior Secretary, has stopped the construction of a giant wind farm. Of course, wind farms have been really in the spotlight lately because of the environmental impacts. Of course, the environmentalists love the wind farms, and then the wind farms kill birds. And the wind farms, when they're ocean-based, they end up wreaking havoc with whales as well as other large mammals. And they're obviously an eyesore. He's directing the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management to stop all construction activities on what's called the Empire Wind Project, which is a development south of Long Island. You work with energy policy and such. What is there benefit to these wind farms in the long run, or do they outweigh anything? It doesn't seem like they're producing as much energy as we were promised.
So yeah, that would be my take here, is that every kind of energy, there are pros and cons, right? There are always going to be some kind of drawbacks. No kind of energy is totally clean. Every single one of them relies on extractive industries in some way, shape, or form and has some kind of environmental impact. And what we have to do as regulators is decide what's the best, most effective, most efficient form of energy for our customers. And I think, unfortunately, in the case of offshore wind, it makes sense in some places. Like a great example is like a country like Denmark that has a lot of coastline, really shallow, lots of room for wind turbines. They can put them really far away, so you can't even really see them from the shore. That makes a lot of sense. It doesn't make as much sense in most parts of the United States. And in this case, Secretary Burgum is essentially making the argument that the Biden administration rushed the process to get this permit done, to try to get it done before Trump came into office, and they want to redo and reevaluate that project. Yeah,
it is pretty rich to see this, that, everything with the federal government, we still don't have those EV charging stations that they spent 4 years on and billions. Even Ezra Klein is angry about them never being able to do that because of the permitting process. But this thing they jammed through at the last minute as Biden went out the door. So it's kind of ironic that suddenly they found something to do, quickly and efficiently. Although it wasn't to benefit an American company, it was actually a Norwegian company that got this contract to make these things. Governor Kathy Hochul, who I think wants to be president, maybe said that she will not allow this federal overreach to stand. I will fight this every step of the way to protect union jobs and affordable energy. And they keep dying on hills that aren't very popular here, Emily. I don't know if it's going to work for them, but we'll see, I suppose.
Well, and also, let's talk federal overreach. We're talking about federal lands and waters oftentimes in this space. And again, like you pointed out, the Biden administration was incredibly selective when it came to which permits it fast-tracked and which ones it didn't. And frankly, it's a great example of why we need to have a permitting overhaul so that we don't run into those kinds of delays and it's not as subjective.
I don't quite understand how it's federal overreach. If it's federal overreach and the federal government has no jurisdiction, then the Interior Secretary couldn't do what he's doing right now, and it wouldn't have required the Biden administration's permit process. So clearly the federal government has jurisdiction here. So it's not overreach. The federal government is just changing their mind, let's say, because we changed presidents. It's 5:53.